Okay, now back to Gongchik, the final statement on chapter 2. So here it says, people claim that not more than one single Buddha arises in a single Buddha field. But here, Kyoba Rinpoche says, many Buddhas appear continuously in a single Buddha field. So again, that first statement, it's a common view. In fact, for sure, Theravada will say that, the Theravada tradition says only one Buddha appears in a single world system. And as long as the teachings of that Buddha exist, no Buddha will arise during that time. So that's a common view. So as I said, often what the statements in Gongchik has to say is not necessarily addressing a wrong view, but rather refining it, getting more kind of showing a deeper understanding. Yeah. In some cases, it is outright, that's a wrong view that the statement is addressing. But in many other instances, it's more like, let's take a deeper look. And in fact, when it's taking a deeper look, what I personally have found, and this is based on having read, materials that, Kyoba Rinpoche himself did not read, as in, Kyoba Rinpoche had no access to, historically no access to, say, the Pali canon or the Chinese material, So based on reading from, that's why I say sometimes, like now, some of us have more information than information, not knowledge, information, or definitely not realization. But we have a lot of information. So my own experience of all the information that I have, what I find really inspiring about Kyoba Rinpoche's statements is that his statements tend to reflect a pre-systematization of the Dharma stage. Yeah. In the development of Buddhism, you could say that the earliest systematization of the Buddha's teachings, putting it neatly into categories, into lists, into things like that, occurred with the first production of Abhidharma texts. Abhidharma called the higher Dharma. So if we look at the most ancient Buddhist classification of teachings, the earliest classification, we have this phrase called Vinaya Dharma. Yeah? Vinaya Dharma. Hyphenated, Vinaya Dharma. So, like, for example, when the Buddha was showing signs of that he's going to pass away, there were some anxieties among the community and wanted him to, like, appoint a clear successor, like a human, and make that person kind of lead the community. Instead, the Buddha said, no, let the Vinaya Dharma be your guide. At that point, if you look at the context, Vinaya Dharma is referring to theory and practice. Let the theory, the teachings, and the practice, Vinaya Dharma. Vinaya is that which subdues the mind, and Dharma are the teachings. So let the practices and the teachings, let that that I have given you, let that be your teacher, let that be your guide. The next stage of that development is the notion of the division into sutra and Vinaya. There, it's two bodies of literature are starting to form. One called the Sutra, which is all these discourses, teachings that the Buddha gave. So they all begin with, thus I have heard at one time the Buddha was at this place with these people, and then he talked about this, and he said this, and they asked this, and he then said this, then they asked this, and at the end, everybody, achieved, this level of realization or that level, and everybody was happy and everybody rejoiced. That's a typical sutra. In the Vinaya collection, it pertains chiefly to the monastic precepts and vows, and all the circumstances for each of the vow, how it was further refined, what happened that led to the creation of this precept or this vow. So a lot of stories in the Vinaya, but not in the form of, thus have I heard at one time, but more of all these training rules and the circumstances for the appearance of these rules and the modification of these rules, all of that, that's in the Vinaya. So that you have these two collections. Then the next stage is the appearance of texts called Abhidharma. Abhi is higher Dharma. So this is said by the tradition to be a more advanced Dharma. But when you look at what's in the Abhidharma, then clearly at that point you can say, now this is the result of the community, the Buddhist community, reflecting on the sutra and the Vinaya material and constructing systematic theory. There are 7 of this. Yes, of course, Buddha himself did use, 3 of this, 4 of that. But at that point of 3 of this, 4 of that, it's a very organic kind of 3 of this and 4 of that. But when you get to Abhidharma, it's when 3 of this, each of this can be divided into 7 parts. And 7 parts, one of each of the 7 parts can be further divided into 2 parts, all of that. So at that point, you can see that now people have, I would even say that at that point, people have started to write rather than just oral text. So when you look at Abhidharma texts from a historical standpoint, you can see that now people are writing already because the whole style, oral text and written text are very different, right? Written text, you can do this, 7 points divided into 2, divided into 4, divided into 8. Yeah, you have this kind of map. So the Abhidharma signifies, the work, I would say. Oh, of course, within the tradition, it will say, oh, no. Buddha taught Abhidharma in Tushita heaven to his mother, to all the gods who are much more advanced in their, okay, fine, But if we come back to the historical level of analyzing these texts, I think it's fair to say that the Abhidharma represents systematic thinking about the Vinaya Dharma. And by that point, there is the Vinaya collection and there is the Sutra collection, and thereby there is the Abhidharma collection, and these 3 becomes called, it's called the 3 Pitakas, or 3 baskets. So now you have concrete texts organized into 3 baskets, 3 collections. So what I'm saying here is like Kyoba Rinpoche's Vajra statements to me, from this historical standpoint, often reflects a pre-Abhidharma stage, where he is less interested in kind of systematizing Buddha's teachings, where he takes a much more organic and practice realization, practice hyphen realization concern, rather than the concern of like building a system and maintaining the system. Does that make sense? Do you understand what I'm saying? Yes, thumbs up, thumbs shaking, thumbs down. Sign language, mudras. High five. Yeah. So a lot of Kyoba Rinpoche is like much more concerned about. He's not so concerned about like making all the 47 statements, organizing them into logical non-contradiction. He's not so concerned about that. So in that sense, he's not, he doesn't work from the Pandita's standpoint. Pandita, the great scholar, the great scholars of Nalanda, who can systematically present the material and debate opponents and, defend the integrity of the Buddhist tradition. I would say that's not Kyoba Rinpoche's emphasis. Kyoba Rinpoche is more, you can say, Milarepa style, Atisha style. Of course, they have mastered, even the great Panditas of Nalanda, the truly great ones, right, also comes from practice and realization. But there is, a tendency of like getting too caught up in the systematization. So anyway, this statement, many Buddhas appear continuously in a single Buddha field. So the commentary, through the perfection of familiarization with the two accumulations is the accumulation of merit and the accumulation of wisdom. Buddha activity is equal to the element of sentient beings, and the element of sentient beings is beyond the limits of the nature of samsara. So this is an interesting statement here. So what Chodra is saying here is this. First, the element, what is element meaning sort of like what is most, you might even want to use the word essence. Of course, Buddhists are supposed to be a little bit shy about using the word essence. So here they use a different word, element. And you say, well, what does that mean? Then maybe what we can say here, another translation, less literal translation, but I think gets to the meaning of what is being said here is like, like the most important thing about sentient beings, the element, the most important thing about sentient beings. So here it says, the most important thing about sentient beings is actually beyond the limits of samsara. So what is it talking about? It's talking about, elsewhere, it's called the Buddha element. Only one aspect of what's most important about human beings or about sentient beings is the experience of samsara. But what's most important about sentient beings is not just that they are capable of experiencing samsara, but they are also able to transcend samsara. So in that sense, right, what's most important about human beings, the element of sentient beings, is beyond the limits of samsara. Then, right, Buddha activity is equal to what's most important about sentient beings. Equal in extent, equal in limits. So this is saying that because of this, we should not think that only one Buddha and one Buddha's activity can be present at any given place at any given time. Since Buddha's vow, all the Buddhas in the plural, their vow is to benefit beings, then there is no limit to the Buddha's activities. Buddhas in the plural. And so quoting Madhyamaka Avatara, it says, because samsara is without a first beginning and a final end, it is called free from beginning and end. As in samsara, I mean, objectively, there is no beginning and no end. Subjectively, of course, there is an end. That is when a sentient being is finally free from samsara, then, there's an end. Subjectively. But here, what Chodrat wants to do is to show how in a sutra-based system, this text, Madhyamaka Avatara, is by Chandakirti, a few generations after Nagarjuna. He writes, Chandakirti writes, because samsara is without a first beginning and a final end, in that way you can say samsara is free from beginning and end. And here, Chandakirti is already hinting at how even samsara, right, which is something that we should leave behind, but its nature is not different from the nature of mind, which is also without beginning and without end. Since this has been taught, each single Buddha is caused to appear in the perception of each single sentient being. So Maitreya's Uttara Tantra says, therefore, in all the water receptacles which are the minds of the pure trainees, immeasurable reflections of the sun, that is the Sugata, appear at once. So here Chodra is saying, as many sentient beings as there are as many appearances of Buddhas. So in that way, don't just think, oh, there is only one Buddha. Oh, our time there is only Buddha Shakyamuni. He says, as long as, there are two sentient beings, there's already two perceptions of two Buddhas. Therefore, although as many Buddhas as there are sentient beings come to each realm of the world, it is never the case that one place is occupied by only one Tathagata. He says that's too limiting, that view. It doesn't take into consideration everything is dependent arising. He says don't treat Buddhas, as a special category. That somehow they just appear one time. And the rest of us, right? Either perceive or don't perceive Buddha. The example for this is the following. At the time when the Buddha was teaching the Mahasanipata Sutra, inconceivable Buddhas of the 10 directions appeared together with their retinue. At the time when the Buddha taught the Sadharma Pundarika Sutra, Buddhas such as Prabhuttaratna filled this Buddha field like sesame seeds. Furthermore, when the Exalted One dwelt in the Indashala cave at the time of the summer retreat, inconceivable Buddhas gathered in the Jukse Gyalpo Buddha field. and undertook deliberations on the teachings. Moreover, countless Buddhas gathered from 100 directions in the realm of Samanta Prabha's world and taught the Tathagata Sangiti Sutra. Inconceivable similar examples are taught. So, of course, here, Chodra is quoting all these Mahayana sutras. So, in the Mahayana sutras, like Buddhas are flying, it's like Buddhas are arriving and departing, like the busiest airport in the United States, Atlanta, It's like Buddhas are landing and departing and landing and departing, The meaning of having gathered incomparable karma, unquote, is that the Buddha who permanently dwells in that Buddha field is the principal Buddha of that field. Since they do not harbor attachment for or aversion to the Buddha, these other Buddhas manifest there as that Buddha's father, mother, son, retinue, and so forth, even down to manifesting as non-Buddhists, and they teach the great qualities. The quote also illustrates their mutually helpful activities. So here, Chodra is saying that the Buddhas from all different world systems, because of their power of their bodhisattva vow, even after they achieve the state of Buddha, they manifest to support the activities of other Buddhas. Moreover, the intention of the teaching in the 3rd chapter of the Gongdu that states, in one world, so this is quoting a Nyingma Tantra, in one world, on one continent, unquote, is that no two supreme Nirmanakaya teachers arise at the same time who reveal the 12 deeds, such as attaining Buddhahood in Vajrasana. Furthermore, since that quote is well known, and since the quote from the Bunbum does not well match our basic texts, let's leave it like it is. But it is not incompatible that apart from one Buddha who dwells permanently in one Buddha field and inaugurates the training, a second Buddha does not appear at the same time. So here, what Chodra is addressing is, he says, when it says that only one Buddha appears at any Buddha field at any given time, here it is specifically talking about a Buddha in the way that Shakyamuni was. In those terms, yes, then only one Buddha appears at any given time. From that perspective. But in terms of the Buddha activities of the other Buddhas, they are all present. And so here, this issue of like incomparable, right? Because it is said, right, in the qualities of the Buddhas, the Buddha is incomparable. So some want to be very literal. They say, if it is incomparable, there cannot be a second one that can be compared to. So then we cannot say that there are two Buddhas in the same world system. Then elsewhere in some texts, it says, like the merit that is required is so great. Not just like for the Buddha to be a Buddha, so much merit is needed, but sentient beings need so much good merit to meet a Buddha. Therefore, there isn't going to be a case where sentient beings will have enough merit to meet two Buddhas simultaneously. So this is again, people wanting to logically figure everything out. But then Kyopa is saying, but you miss the point if you think that there is this limit, that any world system at any time there's only one Buddha. at work. He's saying no. So in Samantabhadra's aspiration, it says, the limit of negative karma is without end, and the limit of sentient beings are without end, and therefore the limit of Buddha's activities are also without end. Without end means no limit, limitless. So here Chodra is saying, yes, insofar as there isn't going to be two Shakyamuni-like Buddhas appearing in the same place. And you can imagine even that it just gets very confusing. If you have two, teaching the same thing appearing at the same time. So in that sense, it's not necessary. But Buddhas do, so to say, assist other Buddhas. Any questions, comments for this? This statement, obviously, kind of stands alone. It's not necessarily directly related to the last statement. But the bigger point here is that we should not think, that Buddha activities are limited to the supreme Nirmanakaya example, which is Shakyamuni, a supreme Nirmanakaya. But that even, for example, in the Mahayana text it says, so there was a great layperson called Vimalakirti that appeared during Buddha Shakyamuni's time. So in fact, Vimalakirti is the emanation of a particular Buddha that came to assist Buddha Shakyamuni's work of benefiting beings in our world system. And then there's many, many other examples like that.
Dr. Lai, I think this statement is very logical, and I understand it because we're told many times that we're trying to manifest ourselves as Buddha. We're told that we're trying to become ourselves Buddha.
Yes. Yes.
So unless more than one Buddha can manifest at any time in a place, the other instructions are futile. They're impossible. So there has to be the ability for more than one Buddha to appear in a Buddha field.
Yeah, but simultaneously, I want to make sure that this is clear. It's saying that appear the way Shakyamuni did, then at any given time, only one.
Yes, because I think also at any given time, being a Buddha, or take Buddha Shakyamuni, he was the supreme, he was not only the supreme realization, he not only had the supreme understanding, but he was also the most skilled at teaching.
Yes.
So in any group of people or sentient beings, there's going to be one who is more skilled, who has the best understanding, who has the greatest abilities. So
or play the main role. So
because of these other attributes, he is able to heal more people. He is able to commit more teaching. There's going to be one who is better than all the others. So for myself, when I read the statement, that's how I interpret it. That in any one period or any group of sentient beings, there is one who is better and more skilled and has better understanding than any of the others.
And then the second point on that is, and it doesn't mean that there aren't equally realized Buddhas at work in that place.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
When we are in tantric practice, we are visualizing different deities, and so they are supposed to be in the same place at the same time. So this seems to be like different from what people say in the general view. And so it is a little, I don't know. I understand what Kyopa Rinpoche wants to convey, but at the same time, the general view is contradicting what you do in tantric practice, I guess.
Yes, but you see, it's context. The general view is not. That's, I think, sometimes, yeah, it's hard for us to understand. And I agree with your point. Like, the general view, right, would make sense, especially in a Theravada context. Like, Theravada don't say all of us should be Buddhas. They say Buddhas are very rare. The rest of us should only be Arhats. So the general view totally makes sense in the Theravada way of looking at things. Yeah. What's curious, yes, I think this is what we're saying here. What's curious is, why in Tibet does Kyopa Rinpoche need to even make this statement, right? We should say, like, what? Who in Tibet thinks only one Buddha can appear at a time? When our texts, our practices, our everything is like Atlanta airport with Buddhas landing and taking off, every second.
Yes.
So this is the curious one. This is something that I don't quite understand. Why he needs to even make this statement, right? Presumably all these statements are made in relation to some of his disciples or someone saying, or saying enough, that he is concerned. Then he says, no.
Yeah.
But apparently there were some people teaching that.
Okay, thank you.
So this is a curious statement. Now, beyond the context of who in the world is Kyopa Rinpoche talking about, right? Beyond that, and to take it to a level that is applicable to my process, to my practice, to my path, I would say the statement nonetheless is a good kind of reminder that even though we say in our time, Buddha Shakyamuni is the one supreme Nirmanakaya that appeared, right? So when they say only one Buddha, they don't mean, when Shakyamuni was walking the earth, only one, and then once he passed, someone else can come. They don't mean that. They say as long as the Dharma of Buddha Shakyamuni remains, there's no need for a second Supreme Nirmanakaya to appear. There's no need for someone that is Shakyamuni-like to appear and then to teach again from the start. There are the Four Noble Truths, there are this, there are that. Why? Because the rationale is that Dharma already exists. So unnecessary, in other words. So to me, the statement is saying, even though it is unnecessary for that kind of Buddha activity to manifest, do not think that Buddha activity does not manifest simply because Buddha Shakyamuni's Dharma is still around. In fact, Buddha activities continue to manifest. That to me is what this point is reminding us. Then Chodra has to introduce something that I think for most of you, maybe you don't understand or didn't even notice. He talks about the Bon Boom. The Bon Boom, he's saying in the Bonpo canon, in the Bonpo, among the Bonpos, they have something like this as well. Then he said something like, but that's not our problem. Furthermore, since that quote is well known, and since that quote from the Bon Boom does not well match our basic text, meaning that's not the text that, we don't accept their text. Let's just leave it as it is. Yeah. So what's going on there, I think, is there were probably people okay, so overall, right, the Bonpo tradition says they have a different Buddha. So I think this might be what's somewhat hiding in the background. Bonpos at some point, especially from the 11th, 12th century on, there is a tradition that came into kind of prominence, calling themselves Bon, but they say they are the white Bon, as opposed to the dark Bon that did animal sacrifice. Like this white Bon do not do animal sacrifice. And for all intents and purposes, they look like Buddhists. But they have their own texts, their own traditions. And they say, this came from a Buddha that lived before Shakyamuni and in this place called Tazik. Some modern scholars think that it's Tajikistan, from Tazik. So they call him Shenrup, is his name. Then they say to the Buddhist, they say, you guys got your teachings from a different Buddha that lived thousands of years after Shenrup and came from India. Okay? Now, both in Bonpo text and in Buddhist text, it is said, no. As long as one Supreme Nirmanakaya Buddha's teachings still exist, there is no need and therefore no case of a second Supreme Nirmanakaya appearing. So this in the Tibetan context might be used to discredit each other. Bonpos discrediting the validity of Shakyamuni's, tradition, or Buddhists discrediting Bonpo's tradition. Implication, you made up that story about the other Buddha, you are just stealing from us. For Chodra, I'm not saying for Kyopa. Kyopa's statement may or may not have anything to do with Bonpo claims. But for Chodra, he has to address that. He says, yeah, I know it's said in the Bonpo text like this, just like in our text it also says like this, but that's not our problem. I don't talk about Bonpos. But the fact that he's talking about Bonpos means, he wants to talk about the Bonpos. Maybe he's feeling like Kyopa's statement, right, gives justification to the possibility that the Bonpos indeed have teachings from a different Buddha. And he's concerned primarily that his fellow Buddhists might accuse Kyopa of allowing the possibility that the Bonpos actually have genuine teachings from a different Buddha. So then Chodra has to bring that up and say, yeah, they say things like that too, but we ignore that because that's not relevant to us. Part of Chodra's commentary, I think, is concerned about this question. So in Sobish's notes, it says, Dorje Sherab and Choki Drogpa clearly reject the quotation from the Bun Bum that simply says, no two Buddhas appear at the same time. But a modification of that is found in the Nyingma Tantra, which says that there cannot be more than one Buddha appearing in the Buddha field in the manner of Shakyamuni, such as revealing the 12 deeds, inaugurating the Dharma, bringing the Dharma completely fresh, and so forth. But the many Buddhas who appear continuously in the single Buddha field, says Dorje Sherab, have nothing but the benefit of sentient beings in mind and have no jealousy, but assist one another in the accomplishment of the activities. Therefore, they appear as the Buddha's father, mother, wife, son, servant, requester of teachings, and so forth. Thus, there are inconceivably many Buddhas who appear in the world for the general salvific, meaning liberation purposes. But a principal Nirmanakaya Buddha of a Buddha field, who like Shakyamuni in his world, gathers incomparable karma, attains great awakening at the Vajra seat, and teaches the doctrine. This kind appears only as a single phenomenon in any world period. So at least in the commentary, they want to maintain both positions in a unified way, which is, yes, when it says that only one Buddha can be present in a single world system, and one Buddha not just literally when he's alive, but his influence, one Buddha and his influence can only, like each world system can only have one Buddha and his influence to be present at any given time. So they want to preserve that, and said by that we mean something like the Buddha, Shakyamuni. But it does not mean that other Buddhas and their skillful means cannot manifest in other ways within that time period. Yes?
Guru?
Yes.
It's interesting that you're mentioning about the Theravada understanding on this particular topic, because generally in the tradition it said that only one Sama Sambuddha at any given time until his teaching has
gone. Yes.
Disconnected. And at the same time, while his influence is still there, no particular Buddha can arise, no other Buddhas can arise.
Yes.
But in the Thai forest tradition, Lonta Mahabua, it was said that when he attained arahatship, and he was generally recognized as an arahat especially in Thailand, he specifically mentioned that at the point of attaining enlightenment,
all the Buddhas came.
Yes, and that's a very, I could say, weird and interesting state.
Yes, yes, and many born again Theravadas are very
some about that
embarrassed by this telling.
Yes,
they have to explain it away, including his disciples later on. They do I know they do all kinds of explanation and say, oh, actually, it's not really that they're appearing, but that, you know, blah, 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 right? I mean, you're familiar with that.
Yes.
Yes.
But again, if we were to follow the conventional understanding of an arahant, an arahant is supposed not to lie. And what they tell is literal.
Yes.
Not metaphorical. They tell literally. So technically, if he is acknowledged as an arahant, therefore the past Buddhas do appear.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
The conflict for the Theravadas are there.
Yeah. So I think the Theravada position is not exclusive to Theravada. You clearly also find in the Sanskrit text. But to me, from a historical point of view, okay, now we step away from like the more religious, right? And this is, for good or for bad, this is my background. You know, I'm also trained as a secular scholar. Yeah? And the way that we would look at this, it would be, if you go back to the earliest layer, the earliest records that we have regarding the Buddha, the early community, and all of that, right? There wasn't a very strong sense that there is a wide difference between Gautama, Shakyamuni, and his disciples. That there wasn't yet such a gap between Shakyamuni's attainment and his disciples' attainment. But they all clearly kind of looked to Shakyamuni as like their teacher. But at that point, Shakyamuni's, at least in these early records that we have, it seems like Buddha Shakyamuni basically emphasized, we are all free now. We are all now good. Rather than I'm, you know, way gooder than you. That seemed to have come a little later. And there are some reasons to believe that that came about because someone like Devadatta started to claim that he too is a Buddha. And the Buddha's rival and cousin. Devadatta claimed so. We have a curious mention by Yi Jing, one of the Chinese pilgrims that went to India, you know. I think Yi Jing went in the 4th century or 5th century, very early or something like that. I don't remember his dates. But I mean, very early from one perspective, but also very late from another perspective. From the perspective of Buddha's time to 4th, 5th century, that's like 1,000 years, okay? Right? More or less. Give or take 1,000 years after Buddha Shakyamuni. When Yi Jing went from China to India and traveling around, he reports that there are communities that say that Devadatta is the real Buddha and not Siddhartha. So you could see that already in the early times, there is a dispute, you know, and it makes sense, you know, like, you know, there this. So the development of this idea that only one supreme Nirmanakaya can be present at any given time probably came about because of these problems. Like everyone saying, well, I'm now the Buddha. Well, I'm now the Buddha. Well, I'm now the Buddha. And then we're all Buddhas. Then eventually nothing makes sense anymore. That mentioned by Yi Jing is very interesting, you know, like even 1,000 years after there's communities who look to Devadatta as their leader. So there is a scholarly study done by, I forgot who, that looked at Devadatta in the earliest sources. And it seems like at the earlier point, Devadatta was never that bad or evil as later sources. And then so some scholars think that there was indeed different factions in the early community. That over time then it became clearly, like there's only one Buddha. So this is historical studies, maybe not necessary for us. On Friday when we meet, we start the third chapter, the chapter on the Vinaya Pratimoksha. This is a very unique chapter. So this is the beginning of the 3 chapters focused on the 3 different levels. The level of the vows of individual liberation, which is what Pratimoksha means. Pratimoksha also is the collection of monastic vows called Pratimoksha. But there's a broader meaning to Pratimoksha, which means individual liberation. So in this context, it is used more in that second sense, that these are the vows, these are the precepts, these are the trainings that we need to adopt if we want to free ourselves from confusion and suffering. So it does not have to be narrowly defined as monks and nuns' vows, even though the 250 monks' vows is collected together and called Pratimoksha. But I want to say, in this chapter, when it talks about Pratimoksha and the Vinaya, it's not limiting it to monks and nuns' vows, but rather to the most basic level of vows. Now we will see how there are some places in this chapter where Kyopa is talking about the monks or nuns' vows. So it also has a more limited meaning, but the broader meaning underlies chapter 2. So on the basis of this broader meaning, that there are these sets of trainings and vows that we need as a basis in order for the next chapter, the contents of the next chapter, which is the training of the bodhisattvas. So chapter 4 is on the trainings of the bodhisattva. And then on the basis of the trainings of the bodhisattva, we need to then have the observance of the mantra awareness holders. So often I've said in the West, we call this the 3 yanas, but actually in the Tibetan material, the expression 3 yanas is not very common. What is way more common is called the 3 sets of vows, or sometimes just the 3 vows. But 3 vows as a translation, people will misunderstand and think it's 1, 2, 3, 3 things. It's 3 sets of vows. Dom-sum, Dompa-sum. Sum is 3. Dompa is vows. The 3 sets of vows, Dompa-sum. So it's the individual liberation vows in the plural, bodhisattva vows, trainings, and then the samayas of the secret mantra. So this is chapter 3, 4, and 5. The chapter on Vinaya Pratimoksha brings some very interesting points that I think will kind of really help us understand Kyopa Rinpoche's emphasis. So like the very first statement, the Vinaya is common to all vehicles. So now the word vehicle is there, yana. So here it is in response to those who say the pratimoksha vows only applies to the Hinayana types. The pratimoksha is only for those who practice according to Hinayana. If you practice the Mahayana, you can just focus on the Bodhisattva training. And in fact, you should abandon the Vinaya training. There are some who talk like this, who express their understanding in this way. But the very first statement says the Vinaya is common to all vehicles. And then the rest of this chapter has some very interesting points, very profound points that I think, it's going to be very interesting. The more you listen and learn from the Gongchik, as I suggested before, don't like learn and listen to this in a vacuum. What you learn from the Gongchik should provide you with a way of reading and listening to other teachings. I'm not saying, that I'm not saying that you have to believe in the Gongchik. But it's not very helpful if you don't like compare. Yeah, you compare, and what conclusions you come to, that is your own process. But don't just learn Gongchik as if, it is the same as what everybody else teaches. Then you're not going to get like the unique or the special benefit that you're going to get from the Gongchik. Yeah. And then especially, I think more kind of creative, loosey-goosey modern teachers who teach Buddhism, especially when you listen to them, you should have your Gongchik reference point in place, and you listen to them teach, and then you need to be able, I hope, to say, I don't think that's how it is, Again, this is not about like finding fault, but this helps you to, polish your understanding. I was just listening to one talk by Jongsa Khyentse Rinpoche, He says, in India, this tradition of debate, he says, if you think that this is just about, debating to defend territory and to defend territory to get more supporters, then you're mistaken, he says. The ancient tradition of debate in India amongst all the different Hindu groups, between them, among them, between Jains and Buddhists and Hindus of this type and that type, he said, they are a tradition of refining one's understanding. That your attitude to that should be that. And not see it as, this is just people arguing because of their ego. And it's true, if you look at it simply on that perspective, then, you won't get anything out of it. But if you look at the disagreement or the debates as a way to sharpen one's own understanding, then it becomes helpful. So likewise, as you learn the Gongchik, use it. Don't be afraid to kind of say, when you're listening to someone teaching the Dharma or reading a book, about the Dharma, and it says this, that, and you say, wait, what does the Gongchik have to say about the way it's said here? Then it will help you sharpen. And when it sharpens your thinking, your understanding, I'm not saying that, you have to say, oh, Gongchik is always right. That is up to you, Don't do this for a sectarian reason. This is not what it is about. And for sure, don't do this for an egotistical reason. Sectarian reason is just a broader definition of ego. Yeah, my sect, my lineage, my founder, and it should not be for that purpose. But at the same time, you should not shy away from comparing. Yeah.
Dr. Lai?
Yes.
May I give an example? I think that's happened to me already.
Okay, sure.
I took a very small book from the library.
Mm-hmm.
It was by the Dalai Lama, and it was on the Four Noble Truths. And I read it, and in the book, he expresses the opinion that, in fact, there is positive karma, negative karma, and neutral, which has a direct bearing on the section that we were reading with, no, there's only positive or negative.
Right, right.
So I immediately took that to be just a different point of view about this one aspect of karma.
Yes.
Which has got a different point of view within Buddhism because he's the Dalai Lama.
Yes.
But it expresses a slightly different view about this one question than we were learning in Gongchik. And on that particular question, honestly, for myself, I'm not sure. I'm taking both. I'm looking at both. Both are plausible, but I don't have my own belief on it. So
yes. Yeah. So you have to note, those differences, and not necessarily say this is right or this is wrong, but let it be fruitful. Let you be aware, like and then in some cases, I think you should say no. I think this person is missed it. And there are a lot of those as well. Likewise, I think we will see as we go into these vows, Bodhisattva vow, the Pratimoksha, there's this view that says, better not to take the Bodhisattva vow yet until you're very convinced. Because otherwise, if you take the vow and then you break it, that will be negative. Sounds reasonable. I think many very genuine, well-trained Dharma teachers will say that. And Khyalpa Rinpoche says, wrong. Yeah, Khyalpa Rinpoche will say, wrong. And you think, wait, how can that be wrong? That's such sound advice, don't make a promise that you cannot keep, Khyalpa Rinpoche says, wrong. We'll see why he says wrong, And I think when you actually, consider why he says wrong and when you understand it, then you can see, because why he says wrong is it has to do with your whole understanding of, in the first place, what the heck is the purpose of taking vows? In a nutshell, he's going to say, if you can perfectly keep it, then you don't need to take it. In the first place, the whole point of taking it is because you cannot keep it. And so then you need the support of a ceremony, like turning in front of witnesses and everybody witnessing you now make a resolve. I will not drink anymore. I will not smoke anymore. If in the first place, right, I never have any desire, inclinations, or anything to smoke, What's the point of, inviting all your friends to a ceremony to say, from now until the end of this life, I shall not smoke. I also make the vow of not killing dragons. Mm-hmm. Huh? Yeah, I can keep that vow perfectly. I vow not to kill dragons. Or if you're a tiger, I vow not to eat any grass. No grass. No eggplant. So Kyopa Rinpoche wants us to understand more. Why did the Buddha even give these vows? Very kind of unique. Chanchu Semchu Rinpoche Ma Ge Ba Nam Ge Gyur Ge Ba Nyam Ba Me Ba Yang Gong Ne Gong Du Be War Sure. One other point here, minor point. So, we are able to admire and respect people for many reasons. Just because someone might not have the correct view, and you recognize that, that is good. But don't dwell on that. See their other qualities and admire and respect them for that reason. This is also part of our practice. To have pure perception of all beings, right, is to see, right, all their qualities. And when we occupy our mind with those qualities, our mind in that moment takes on those qualities. But when we are taught to analyze a position, a view, a presentation of the Dharma, to be able to see like faults or mistakes, there it's not so that you can say, this person, da, 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 da. No, it's so that, again, it serves as a mirror for us to immediately say, oh, with regards to this way of viewing things, do I have this view or not? And not dwell on, so-and-so has this view. And therefore they're wrong, they're wrong, they're wrong, they're wrong, they're wrong. But rather, do I have this view? Do I have this mistaken understanding? And if I do, now let's focus on removing it. Yeah. So it should not be, Sakya Pandita, wrong again. Oh, Sakya Pandita, wrong again. He's often the one that Drigong people have to respond to because he wrote very early on his objections to what Kyopa Rinpoche says. So subsequent to that, for a few hundred years, Drigong people keep bringing up Sakya Pandita. But this is not about Sakya Pandita being wrong. Okay, ta-ta.